Haras Rafiq is Managing Director of the Quilliam Foundation. He joins us now from central London. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Rafiq. The identikit many people have of a disillusioned young person with nowhere to go, no opportunities, being blocked at every angle of progress is the kind of the formula we normally think of radicalisation. But this is a young man who seemed to have every opportunity with a degree which he passed with second-class qualifications. So that kind of goes in the face of that. So we need to be open to radicalisation works, don't we?
Sure. Within the practitioners, within the experts that actually deal with extremism and countering terrorism, we've known for a long time that at least 42–43% of the convicted Islamist terrorists in Britain have had higher education and further education. If you look at the recent 3 girls that went from central London, A-star students, you look at the guys who went from Cardiff, one of them looking to be a doctor. So this is, it's a bit of a misnomer that the profile is disenfranchised, uneducated. Some of the very, very senior members of Islamist organisations, in fact, are, in Britain and around the world, are doctors, are consultants, psychiatrists. So it's really an ideology rather than a lack of opportunities that we're actually dealing with. The other thing that's really interesting is Westminster University has form. It has a history of inviting hate preachers, people who have their organisations being investigated by the Charities Commission, people who believe, like the Islamic State does, that in an ideal Islamic state, providing due conditions of Sharia and due process are met, people who commit adultery should be stoned. These people have been invited onto campus. In fact, there was one that was meant to be there this weekend, and after the exposure yesterday, that event has been postponed. So it's not quite as simple as to say that if somebody's doing well at university, then he will not become radicalised. And in fact, at least 6 former presidents of Islamic societies in universities from Britain have been convicted, and this is for a while now, we've known this, have been convicted of Islamist terrorism.
Right, we know that all sorts of organisations cruise the university student body looking for potential recruits. We know that big companies doing it, looking for smart businessmen of the future. We know that security services doing it, looking for potential spies. We know that cult religions do it, looking for potential converts, and also those that might radicalise youngsters at their student age, get involved with things like ISIS. What are they looking for? Are there any signals that these kind of recruiters have in common?
Yeah, basically what they're looking for are people who have either genuine grievances that they can manipulate, or partial grievances, or even in some cases perceived grievances. And what they do is they create a lens or a prism by using push and pull factors to actually drive them down certain pathways, give them an ideological framework to say the only way they're going to find a solution to these problems is to join their gang, which happens to be the gang that wants the utopian Islamist caliphate through fighting or by any means necessary. And then there's the theological justification that comes along with it, the Salafi Jihadi theology that says not only does God want you to do it, God will reward you will reward you if you do this. The interesting thing is the question that you asked before, what do we do about it? There are essentially 2 key areas, I think, that first of all, once we know that people have expressed sympathy, empathy and a desire and a support for this type of ideology, we need to provide some form of interventions or disruption or even rehabilitation. That's what we call the sharp end of prevent. The soft end of prevent, which is the long-term strategy, is really about tackling the non-violent extremist ideologies like race, in the same way that we would tackle racism or fascism, things that we don't accept as a society. And we challenge them in debates, we challenge them by building resilience within the community so that youngsters have the ability to push back. That's the way we've got to challenge this, both short-term and long-term. Unfortunately, the second part that I mentioned, from a governmental perspective and from a society perspective, I think for many years now we haven't been doing this. And certainly when Osama bin Laden was killed, many people around the world thought that the head of the snake has been killed and it's now, the job is done. But the reality is you can't kill an ideology, you have to debate it and you have to actually expose it for what it really is.
Because there'll be many whose, justifiably, their reaction to someone like this young man who's been beheading people, or probably been beheading people on videos, is that he should be stamped out, that he should be punished, he should be flogged, whatever anyone's imagination comes up with at the time to help with their outrage. The danger in making the approach that you're outlining to me now is that you run the risk of describing such a man as Jihadi John as a victim rather than a terrorist, and that'll make it very hard to recruit support for you.
No, and absolutely not. I make no bones about this. He is not a victim. In fact, I was actually quite disgusted at the way that organisations like Cage actually spun this story yesterday, and the inaccuracies as well. We know that even before he contacted Cage, he was going out to join Al-Shabaab, he was recruited, and he was radicalised within the university, and shortly went to commit a terrorist act shortly after he left university. He's not a victim, he's a cold-hearted, cold-blooded, calculated terrorist, and I have no sympathy for the actions that he's carried out. What I'm saying is that there are young 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds that need mentoring out of this ideology. Once they get past the point, if they've committed a crime or they're about to commit a crime and the danger is clear and present, we have to arrest them and they have to go through the due process. By no means am I, by any way at all, saying that Jihadi John is a victim. He's not. He's a terrorist.
Okay, we know, and if we don't know, we can imagine that the government is extremely concerned about two things. One is the radicalisation of youngsters, as we've just outlined, and also what happens to returnees once they come back from this radicalised experience abroad, what they bring back home with them. Who do we recruit? What do we call that unit, that department that deals with those people, that makes those approaches, that goes in and interrupts that psychological process to the better of our society? Because it seems that too much exposure to the security services doesn't do any good at all.
No, I think that we have a programme at the moment called the Channel Programme, which we didn't have when Jihadi John came back from Tanzania. It was there, but it wasn't really in the form that it is now, and it was evolving. We now have a programme called Channel, and the best results I've seen, and I've been in this field now for about 10 years, is where we've had former extremists who have completely disavowed the whole ideology, the whole theology, and we have them within Quilliam. In fact, Quilliam was set up by a former extremist who served time in an Egyptian prison for trying to instigate a military coup. These, I think, are the best people placed to dissect the intellectual, the emotional, the spiritual and social aspects of the narratives that have radicalised these people in the first place. But I also want to say one thing. We won't be able to de-radicalise everybody. And there will be some people that, will have to go through the due process, and we should, because they've broken the laws. If they've gone out to join a terrorist organisation under the 2006 Terrorism Act, they have broken a law, and we have to bring them back and then try them in an open court to see if they have committed crimes. And if they have or they haven't, we still need to, at some stage, try to rehabilitate and reintegrate them back into society. And Channel is one mechanism. Another mechanism is really people like us. We're doing this without even involving Channel for people who haven't been radicalised yet, or families where there are concerns that the children might be going down this process. Okay. It started, it's happening, and I think that, I disagree with some aspects of the way that the government is actually wanting to handle and deal with returnees. Things like making them stateless. I think that's really not a good way forward. But certainly, if people have broken the law, they go through the due process. Former extremists, former jihadis who have disavowed the ideology and theology are the best people, I think.
Haras Rafiq, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening here on Sky News.